Hello there, what is going on everyone? Today we are going to be doing another Armada ship breakdown for the Imperial Raider. This is a small, fast ship for the Empire and a really cool ship as a matter of fact. You may have seen it in Star Wars Battlefront 2, you may have seen it in Star Wars Squadrons, you may have seen it in Star Wars X-Wing, or of course, in Star Wars Armada. It's one of the newer ship designs to hit the Star Wars universe in recent years. But it's certainly kind of shown up. And the cool thing about this particular ship, a little backstory, is that it actually was co-developed by FFG for inclusion in the Star Wars X-Wing because they needed a triangular-looking ship that they could bring into the epic format. You know, they only had the CR-90 and the GR-75 for the Rebels, and they didn't really have anything that fit the bill for the Empire that would look cool and kind of represent that Imperial presence. And so they kind of designed this as kind of a cross between a TIE Interceptor and a Star Destroyer, but in that Corvette-sized frame so that they could have a large ship for Star Wars X-Wing. And then, of course, it was also used in Battlefront and then has been showing up in video games and in Star Wars media all over the place. And so, of course, it had to make its way into Star Wars Armada. We're going to be talking about this ship today. If you guys are new here to the channel, we are still giving away that $70 Amazon gift card for a Shadow Collective core box. Again, all you have to do to enter to win that gift card is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. You know, also check out some of the links that are in the video description below. I'd love to have you join our Discord. There's a whole lot of people in the Discord. We'd love to have you join, ask questions, join the community, do list building ideas. We still have a painting competition going on in there. There's also some other giveaways in Discord. We also have other giveaways going on in Patreon. And if you head over to Crabbok.com, there's the free Armada AI as well as some other content over there you can check out. It's all free. So again, links for all of that stuff are going to be in the video description below. With all that being said, let's go ahead and start talking a little bit more about the Imperial Raider. So again, it's a small, fast ship for the Empire. It is not particularly good at being a carrier, not particularly good at long-range combat. It's definitely a black and blue dice heavy ship. It is very fast, however, though it does lose a lot of its maneuverability at top speeds. It really kind of excels around the Speed 2 area, where it has maximum maneuverability without even the need of any nav tokens at Speed 2. Or nav commands, because it just has the 2-2 yaw. It's got incredible yaw, so it can turn really, really tight at slower speeds, but once it begins to speed up, it loses some of that flexibility, although it still has pretty good maneuverability, even at Speed 4. It's just not great. But again, Speed 4 ships are pretty rare in the Empire, so it's pretty nice to see this. It is only 4 hull, and while it does have a brace token and 2 evades, it doesn't have any redirect. So those 2 shields on all 4 sides are not going to do it a whole lot of help. But it is also a pretty cheap ship. Both versions of this ship, the Raider 1 and the Raider 2, come in at less than 50 points. Which make it a possible swarm ship, but maybe not the best swarm ship because of the lack of red dice. You have to kind of get it up close and personal, and it's kind of always a tricky ship in that it wants to be closer to enemy ships to really deliver its payload, but at the same time, it is so fragile that it can die before it gets there. And of course, the upgrades in the Armada 1.5 rule set that boosted evades kind of help give the Raider a little bit more staying power. So that is something that definitely benefits it. Of course, it's a Command 1 ship, as most small ships tend to be. Only 1 squadron and 2 engineering. Most of its armament are on the front, where it kind of wants to point at enemy ships. It's kind of like a miniature Star Destroyer in some ways, very, very miniature. But it kind of functions in some of that same ways in that it's fast. It kind of wants to point at the enemy and deliver its payload in that way. Now, if we look at the profile of the ship, we can see that the front arc is a fairly big arc, although its side arcs are moderately wide as well. So as long as it's generally pointed towards you, it's going to be able to get you with some of its payload. Its rear arc is definitely the weakest, and so it doesn't want to have enemies in its rear. It definitely wants to have enemies in its front, and potentially side for a double arc shot is kind of the way that you want to do this. You want to kind of double arc somebody with the front and side. at close range if possible. And of course, that's always tricky to do. And if you're swarming it, you usually can't always get that many ships in. Again, if you're running like 5 of these, you're not going to have 5 of them all in close range of somebody at the same time. While it is technically possible, realistically, it's not very feasible to do that. So, it's something I usually see people run like 1 or 2 of these. I don't see people swarm them as often. They tend to do really good at going after objectives. They tend to do really well at at being kind of that flank ship. It's not important enough that you really need to dedicate your enemy fleet towards coming after a raider. So maybe you can kind of ignore it, and we hope that you do, because then when it sneaks in behind you, it can actually deliver a lot of dice. If ignored, it can be very deadly, and that's kind of the role that the raider tends to play. The other thing that the raider excels at is anti-squadron armament, which we're going to look at on some of the individual ship variants. So first off, let's take a look at the Raider 1 class Corvette. This one is the black die heavy version, also the cheaper version. This one excels in black dice a little bit more than the Raider 2, and we can see that in its anti-squadron value of having 2 black. Now, 2 black is really, really cool to roll against squadrons. You have a less range, but you have the best odds of actually getting hits. You have a 75% chance on each of those black die to get a damage, so you're looking at a pretty good odds of getting 2 damage on every single enemy squadron you fire upon. And since, of course, a single squadron attack hits everybody in range, now your range is going to be a little bit smaller, but if you can get in there and guarantee it, and make sure that you get those shots, you're going to be able to do that. And we're going to see a little bit of the titles a little bit later on that are going to impact this ship to help it work really, really well with anti-squadron firepower. But that's not the only place that it has excellent black dice. In its front arc, it also has 2 black and 2 blue. And the combination of black and blue are a really nice combination, because one of the things that black dice lack is the accuracy. It's notorious for big ships like Demolisher to roll a whole bunch of black dice, but they don't have that accuracy, and so your opponent is able to brace it down and cut all of that damage down into half. And the Raider tries to mitigate that weakness by having a blue die in every single arc. And in this case, it has 2 blue in the front and a blue die in each side and the rear. And that means that you have pretty good odds of getting a accuracy to accompany potentially a couple of nice black hit crit dice, which you kind of want to hope for when you are able to pull this alongside an enemy flagship and try to deliver a massive payload. You definitely want to have at least 1 accuracy in there to stop the brace, and that's kind of one of the things that it can do. Now, the Raider 1 has, of course, an officer, a weapons team, a offensive retrofit, and an ordnance upgrade. Now, ordnance being the key word here, since you'd have so many black dice on this ship, ordnance is going to be what you want. Now, of course, that can be anywhere from giving you black die crit options, like the assault concussion missiles, or extra dice with expanded launchers. Always a nice thing. Now, your weapons team also is going to vary a little bit. Usually on a black die heavy build, a lot of times you'll run ordnance experts, so this way you can re-roll up to 2 black dice per attack, and of course that's going to work really well on this ship, especially if it wants to go dual purpose and attack both ships and enemy squadrons. Every single time you are attacking, you'll be able to trigger those ordnance experts. So Raider 1 is really, really good for that. Of course, it does have to stay alive long enough to get to where it needs to be. And with no redirect, it still has some survivability. The brace is great. And the evades are better than they've ever been, so it's got some survivability, but trying to get into black die range, Raiders tend to want to be first player if they can, All right, next up is the Raider 2. Now, the Raider 2 is the one that tends to survive a little bit more because it doesn't need to be quite so close. This is the blue die version, and it's a little more expensive. It's 48 points as opposed to the 44 of the Raider 1. So you're paying 4 more points, but you're gaining a little bit of range, right? So starting from the top, one thing that changes on the Raider 2 is our Anti-Squadron Armament actually changes from 2 black to a blue and a black. Now, this means that we have a little bit more range because that blue die reaches a little bit farther than the black die does. But we have slightly less odds of actually both dies coming up with a hit, since a blue die only has a 50% chance of giving you a damage. However, it's kind of a mixed bag because you could always get that accuracy on the blue, and then of course your black die could be a hit, and that could go up against the scatter ace, and so you can use the accuracy to lock out the scatter and ensure at least you deal 1 damage. So again, like for different purposes, the Raider 2 can potentially be better, although it is a little bit less likely to put max damage out there. The Raider 2 generally, the way I look at it is the Raider 2 is probably better for aces, whereas the Raider 1 is better for generic squadrons, since generics usually don't have defense tokens that really want that blue die in the first place. Now, when we look at the ship's battery armament, the only change is that our front arc loses a black die but gains an extra blue die. So we're looking at 3 blue and 1 black on the front. A little bit more blue dice delivery, but it's complemented by the fact that we no longer have the ordnance upgrade at the bottom, but now we have the ion cannon upgrade. And much like how ordnance tends to impact black dice, the ion cannon tends to interact and work with blue dice. And of course, this is kind of what you want for a ship like this. The ion cannon upgrade gives you so many different things that you can do, whether you are trying to hit heavy ion emplacements to give somebody a shield drain across the board, or you're trying to exhaust all of their defense tokens with something like overloaded pulse. This is a great ship for both of those options, and I really like the Raider 2. I think it's probably my favorite version of the ship, although they're both really good for different options. But in the fact that there's so many different things that you can do to extend range, since there are offensive retrofit options like disposable capacitors that extend blue dice range out to long range for 1 round. Could be a great option for a ship like this. And so I really like the Raider 2's ability to get blue dice crits at long range for a pretty reasonable price. Other ships can do it, but this is definitely the cheapest way to do that, and I very much like that. Also, I want to point out that both of the Raiders, since they have a weapons team and an offensive retrofit, they can take boarding parties. Various boarding parties exist that use both the weapons team and the offensive retrofit, and this makes for a kind of a strike assault type ship that can move very, very fast, get close, and if you are able to activate before your opponent activates and either moves out of the way or blows you up, you can spend a squadron dial or token to activate a boarding party, which can do all sorts of different things, ranging from exhausting defense tokens to getting rid of upgrade cards. And so the boarding parties are pretty cool, and the Raiders are the cheapest way the Empire has to get those out and get them on board enemy ships. So that is also another really cool use of the Raider Corvettes. Now, there are 3 titles available. 2 came with the Raider expansion, and 1 came later on in one of the campaign expansions. So we're going to talk from left to right here. We'll start with the Instigator. It's a 4-point title. The Instigator says enemy squadrons at distance 1 are treated as if they are engaged by 2 additional squadrons, even if they are not currently engaged. So Instigator, what it basically does is it does lock down enemy squadrons. It allows you to be a ship that is going to prevent those enemy squadrons from moving, prevent those enemy squadrons from attacking other ships and from doing all of this stuff. It's also a great way. And the reason it has 2 on there too is also to help with grit. Grit is a keyword that is actually more common now than ever, with Intel being changed to give grit. So the Instigator is going to do great things for that. The Instigator title is good to make sure that enemy squadrons don't move away, because again, the Raiders has great anti-squadron firepower. Instigator gets in there and it says, I'm going to move in a position, but then I'm going to stop you from leaving. Now, of course, it's dangerous because all of those squadrons can then turn and attack the Instigator. And you certainly don't want that, although it can combo with other heavy squadrons and allow them to kind of be involved in the fight as well. So it's a way to kind of make sure that squadrons stay put, and of course that can combo well with the rest of your fleet to either move your squadron killers into place, or of course it works well on a squadron killer build type of Raider itself. The Impetuous is the next title we're going to look at. It's also a 4-point title. It says, at the end of your attack step, choose one of your hull zones. You may perform an attack against one enemy squadron from that hull zone, even if you've already attacked from that hull zone this round. So Impetuous just lets you attack an extra enemy squadron again. So this is adding extra firepower out there. It's super cool. Of course, it's going to work with any kind of attack effects you have. So if you have something that triggers while attacking, then of course that will work. Although a lot of those effects don't, a lot of the effects in game that say while attacking, you have to read them because a lot of them will say while attacking a ship. But some of them will say while attacking or while attacking an enemy squadron. So like Ordnance Experts is while attacking, so that's either one. Agent Callus, for example, is while attacking a unique squadron. So if you're trying to bring down that scatter ace and you attack them and then they, oh, okay, no problem, they scatter. All right, well then, you know what, no problem, I'm gonna attack you again. And it's even better if you have things like Agent Callus, because then you get to add dice to every single attack. So that's really cool. Granted, if you have an Impetuous, you probably want to bring some squadrons to help lock everything down, because I don't know about you, but if I see somebody bringing an Impetuous after my Luke Skywalker or my high-value squadrons, I'm hightailing it out of there. I'm not going to sit by and let you just attack me twice. I'm going to move away. So you need to kind of plan for that. So while Instigator locks them up, it doesn't add extra firepower. Impetuous adds extra firepower, but doesn't lock them up. So they're both geared for anti-squadron play, but they approach it in different ways. Corvus, however, is totally different. So let's take a look at Corvus. It's a 2-point title, so it's the cheapest title for the Raider. It says, after deploying fleets, you may redeploy this ship within your deployment zone. So this is interesting for so many reasons. It's actually a remarkably beautiful and simplistic title that has a number of really cool interactions with the game. So basically, you are going to deploy this as normal, and then just treat it as a normal ship on the game that you would deploy either first, second, third, whenever you want. Usually Corvus tends to go first. And then once all deployment is done, then you get to redeploy it and you're inside your deployment zone. Now, the interesting thing about Corvus is that it gives you kind of a extra activation advantage or extra deployment advantage, because a lot of times you want to kind of stall with deployments. If you're new to Armada, this is like one thing that like a lot of new players will screw up in, is when you're deploying ships, you kind of want to save your highest value ships to last. Your first couple of deployments are kind of like your cheaper ships, or your ships that you can afford to lose. Because if I put my flagship out there right away, all of a sudden where it's going to be, and now you know where to deploy all of your forces. And so you kind of, there's a lot of strategy that goes into the deployment step. And so Corvus gives you a tremendous strategic advantage in that, well, wherever I put this first, you might, put all of your stuff, to fly right at it, but it's not there. It turns out that was just a sensor echo. It's actually all the way over here. But the other thing that's really cool about that is that it gets to go at the very end. So you're always going to get last deployment with that, and that's pretty cool as well. Unless, of course, it's a mirror match and you're playing another Corvus. But there's also a third really cool aspect to Corvus, and that it can counter certain objectives, because there are certain objectives that force a player to deploy in particular areas, and so that's a really interesting way to do things, like surprise attack, right? Like you've got to deploy your flagship, overlapping the station, and so maybe I make Corvus my flagship. It's actually a really great option for a flagship if you want something that we call a lifeboat. In that, and if you saw my most recent battle report, you'll see that how well it can work in this regard. But it's a great way to kind of have a commander on a small fast ship that can, if the commander doesn't need to be on a ship that's in the middle of the fight. If you want your commander to kind of just stay safe, you can put him on a Corvus and then redeploy it somewhere safe and have it pointing kind of away from the fight, which can be strategic at times. But it's also great for things like station assault. Oh, do I have to deploy my flagship overlapping the station? The advantage of being, second player is they think they're going to be able to kill your flagship. And if you make Corvus your flagship and it's deployed really far forward, oh, you know what? No problem. Boom. Now I get to redeploy it, which is nasty. Or, of course, ambush zone. You can deploy it, again, in the trap, and then all of a sudden it gets to escape the trap. So it's really good for that, and kind of counters certain objectives, but also gives you deployment advantage, and that's a really cool thing. All right, so now I want to take a look at a couple of sample builds using some of the Raiders and some of the titles, and we'll take a look at some of the ways that I like to run them, and of course I want to hear about some of yours as well. So first up, we have just kind of a sample generic Raider build. This is one that I really like to run. I like to run a Raider 2 with disposable capacitors. Of course, we're gonna exhaust disposable capacitors, and for this activation, I'm gonna be able to throw my blue dice at long range, which means now all of a sudden I've got 3 blue dice that I can throw out at long range. All of a sudden, my Raider 2 is very survivable at long range. By the way, I've got 2 evades and a brace. I mean, you're not gonna kill my Raider at long range. It's gonna, I can easily burn a brace and cancel 2 of your red dice, then brace everything else. You're going to get, what, 1 or 2 damage through that when I might not even get through my shields. No problem. I'll be able to activate, shoot, and then move to safety. But that's why I want Gunnery Team on here, too, because since it's a Command 1 ship, I'll know when I'm going to be making that shot. I can set a Concentrate Fire. Now all of a sudden I've got 4 blue dice, and since I've got long range, I get to use Disposable Capacitors effect on another shot in that big wide front arc that I've got. So this is a really great way to get, 4 blue dice at one ship and then 3 blue dice on another ship at long range. And I put Overload Pulse on here. You can use any blue crit. But I really like Overload Pulse on the Raider 2 with these two, because this makes for a great first shot of the round. Because for a couple of reasons. First off, I have pretty darn good chances of getting the blue crit. And of course, depending on which commander you use, if you're using rerolls or anything like that, you might have even better luck. But Overload Pulse is, if I get the crit in, it's going to exhaust the defender's defense tokens, which, again, if I've got the whole rest of my fleet ready to open up on you afterwards, that's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. So super, super good. But also Overload Pulse doesn't exhaust. So that's another cool reason to run it in this particular. If you're going to try and get 2 shots off of it, you can actually overload 2 ships' defense tokens. And by the way, you can also use it next turn. I mean, you won't have disposable capacitors next turn, but next turn you might even be closer, so you probably won't need it. And that's the beauty of disposable capacitors here, is that you probably won't need it next turn. And if you're able to go again next turn, that'd be even better. You might survive. You might not survive too many turns. The Raider 2 like this is probably going to be a little bit more of a priority target, because it can wreak so much havoc on an enemy fleet. But here's just a good generic build. We have an Instigator build here, and this one is definitely built to be anti-squadron. Definitely built to be heavily anti-squadron. We're using a Raider 1 here with the double black dice. We want to throw lots of black dice against enemy ships. We have flechette torpedoes here. If we're able to move into, if we go up against a really big nasty squadron ball, if we can move into that squadron ball and hopefully stop them all from moving away with the Instigator, hopefully I can make it like, oh, you're engaged, can't move away, no problem. Maybe you stay alive for me to be able to attack next turn. Here come the flechette torpedoes. I can hopefully roll crits on everybody and remove that die, flip their toggle their switch. Now they don't even get to activate. And if that can happen, then you can be in a really good position to keep a number of enemy squadrons locked down. And of course, if they do attack you, you've got quad laser turrets. Now you get to counterattack them, and you've got Agent Callus on there, of course. So now when you're attacking uniques, you get an extra die of any color added to your pool. Of course, you can add a black there. You get to re-roll all your blacks with ordnance experts, and then potentially you have flechette torpedoes. Although you probably wouldn't flechette torpedo on a counter because they've already activated, right? So it's not gonna do anything there. But it's a pretty potent. A lot of points in this one, but it's a pretty heavy anti-squadron build here. We also have a little bit more diversity on what the Raider 2 can do. We have a Corvus build here. This one might make for a good flagship, or maybe just a good precision damage dealer here. A couple of things. We still have disposable capacitors here. I think it's definitely the upgrade of choice for the Raider 2. But here I've put heavy ion emplacements. Okay, well, again, draining the shield zone and the adjacent shield zones. Amazing opening attack on a fully shielded ship. Great attack. Problem with this one is if you don't get that crit, it's really bad. And instead of Gunnery Team, granted Gunnery Team is an awesome option here, you could also consider Gunnery Chief Varnillion. In this particular example, since heavy ion emplacements does exhaust Gunnery team might be slightly less beneficial here because you won't be able to drain shields from 2 different ships. But with Gunnery Chief Varnillion, you have a much better chance of guaranteeing that blue crit. And so that's a very, very cool option. We also put Ida Inversio on here. She's just fantastic. Of course, she allows those evades to work even at close range. And she also has a boarding party action, which is not really the best part of her, but of course it's cool if you wanted to do it. But she's just going to add extra survivability to the ship, which is pretty cool. So again, she works pretty good as an officer if you want it to be a flagship. In case you are kind of afraid that you might die, she's an option. But there are, there's other officers that tend to offer even more protection given the circumstances. For example, we have Captain Brunson on a Raider 1 Corvette. Captain Brunson is like the ultimate survival officer. She is just exhausts to cancel an attack die. You just have to be close to an obstacle, of which obstacles tend to be plentiful, especially in the Empire, since you have things like interdictors that can move obstacles around. But this is an impetuous build, and of course we're going to be able to do a little extra attacking. This one is kind of this one's going to go in and die, so if you are going to run something like this, you might not run all of this. You might run it without Impetuous. You might run it without Captain Brunson. But it has Darth Vader. This is our boarding team, our one, right? Well, this is the ship that wants to get in there, blow its load, and hopefully, and maybe it's able to survive. But like Brunson's here is just to make sure it gets there long enough to survive. So she's on there to cancel a die. Darth Vader is going to go and strip the title off of an enemy flagship. Like, oh, was that home one? It's not home one anymore. Or take the most annoying upgrade off of an enemy flagship, which is going to be exceptionally cool that he can do that. External racks also feeds into the one and done kind of mentality. For only 4 points, you're getting 2 extra black dice. Great when you just need to shoot and need to go. However, one of the cool things about external racks is that if you don't want to just blow your load on an enemy ship, or maybe you can't, you can also always consider dumping external racks on an enemy squadron, because external racks is not limited to attacking a ship. It's something you can, of course, it is only once per game, but you can use it while attacking a squadron. Of course, it won't be for everybody in the squadron. It'd just be the one. But since it kind of works with what Impetuous is doing a little bit. Impetuous kind of wants to double down on a single squadron, like really focus down this massive health squadron, and external racks could assist you in doing that, which is a fun thing. All right, guys, that's a quick look at the Imperial Raider. If you liked what you saw here, go ahead and give the video a like and thumbs up and share it and all of that good stuff. I'd love for you guys to always let me know what you think. Again, don't forget to join our Discord. We have a great family-friendly Discord. It talks about Armada, X-Wing, Legion, lots of tabletop games, Marvel Crisis Protocol, Games Workshop games too. We'd love to see your lists. We'd love to see photos of your games in progress. We got stuff for all of that in there, so definitely check that out. But thank you guys so much for watching, and if you want to see more, of course, I'll have some links over here in just a moment. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are absolutely amazing. And I couldn't do this without your continued support. So thank you for supporting the channel. And as always, guys, make sure that when you are wearing headphones, you don't stick them too far down your ears, unless, of course, they have a cord and you can pull them up. You don't want to get your headphones lost deep within your ear canal. Okay, that was silly. That was just nonsense. Sometimes the end of the video things are good. That one was just nonsense. You caught a real bummer of a end quote today.